Good evening, everybody. My name is Betsy Fischer Martin, and I'm the Executive Director of the Women in Politics Institute at American University. Welcome to our virtual series, Women on Wednesdays. We are glad that you are here with us. To those of you new to one of our events, WPI is a nonprofit and nonpartisan institute in AU's School of Public Affairs that aims to close the gender gap in political leadership. And we offer academic and practical campaign training, and we facilitate research and discussions like this on women in politics and leadership. And today we're, I guess, about a month out from Mother's Day, but it's never too early to talk about the importance of moms. And in this case, moms in politics. We are excited to have with us tonight Liuba Grechen Shirley, who runs an organization called Vote Mama, which is dedicated to helping more moms run for office. And in 2018, she actually ran for Congress in New York's 2nd Congressional District against Republican incumbent at the time, Peter King. She was at that time a mom of 2 young children, ages 1 and 3. Now she has 3 children, but she spent many a campaign appearance carrying a baby and holding her toddler's hand. And after months of this, she realized, of course, that it just wasn't sustainable to run for office, being a full-time job in and of itself. And what she did made history and opened doors for other mothers of young children to run for office. She successfully petitioned the Federal Election Commission for approval to use her campaign funds for childcare. So she's going to share her story and tell us about the PAC and the foundation that she founded, and have a discussion about the ways we can try to increase the number of moms in politics. And we are also going to take your questions and hear your thoughts. So please feel free to type in the Q&A tab, and we will be sure to save some time for that. So Liuba, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited and apologize for my voice. I am recovering from the flu.
Well, we're glad that you could make it. And I guess that is one advantage of doing things on Zoom. We don't have to worry about everybody getting sick, right? So thank you for doing this. We really appreciate it. Take us back a little bit. I mentioned that 2018 race that you ran in, didn't unfortunately win, but the story about what motivated you to run for office is really interesting. So can you just take us back to that point and give us a little bit of background on what inspired you to make the first time run for office?
Yeah, I had no intention of running for office. I'll take you back a little bit before when I went to NYU for undergrad and graduate school. I lived in the city, and I had grown up on Long Island. I did not plan on moving back to Long Island, and I got pregnant with my first child. I was the director of a research institute at NYU. I loved my work, and I did not have paid family leave and could not get off of any childcare wait lists. And that was my experience with my first child. And I stayed in the city till she was about a year old, and my husband and I decided to move to Long Island because my mom was here, and we would have childcare. And it was always supposed to be temporary. We moved back here, or I moved back here. He's not from Long Island, but we moved here, and it was very unusual because we moved here at the height of the Trump election, and it was like moving into a completely different place, coming from New York City to Long Island, where there were Trump flags everywhere, and there were parades in the town next to me with dummies of Hillary Clinton in a cage on the back of a pickup truck. And it was surreal to be here where I grew up in the midst of this very, heated election cycle. And Peter King had been in office since I was 12. I, wasn't planning on running against him, but he had consistently blocked people from his Facebook group. He wouldn't allow people to ask questions. You could never get him to hold a town hall. And the election happened, and I kept reaching out to my local party and saying, how can I get involved? What can I do? And nobody would get back to me. And I ended up starting an indivisible group and started organizing. I started putting every morning I would write an action alert. This is the particular issue we're calling our representative about. These are the details. This is what we're going to call and ask for. And I ended up organizing a Facebook group that grew to about 3,000 people. And
Wow.
then Peter King came out in support of the Muslim ban. And I reached out to groups across the island, and we put together a protest in front of his office. And I remember calling his office on a Friday, and I said, we're having this protest. I would love to sit down and talk to my representative. And they told me to come in at 3:30 that afternoon. And I got there at 3:30. They had locked the doors and sent all the staff home. And we had 400 people protest. And on Monday morning, I called, and he agreed to meet with me. But he later told the press he met with a leader of a resistance group, not a constituent. And when I asked if he would hold a town hall, he told me that a town hall would only diminish democracy. And that was when I really started to think this man, he needs somebody to run against him. And I ended up holding a town hall, and a couple hundred people showed up, and he did not. And it was at that point that people started to ask me if I would consider running against him.
And so what made you decide to, obviously you had a lot going on. Did you have any idea how difficult it would be just in terms of your own time?
No, I had no idea. And until you've actually worked on a congressional campaign, or if you know somebody personally who's done it before, there's no way to figure this out. I remember I found a survey once that congressional members had filled out about how much of their time was spent doing certain things, and I read that. And I remember trying to find quotes, and I found some really great articles with quotes from Grace Meng or Kirsten Gillibrand about giving birth in office and what that was like. And I remember thinking, well, if they can give birth in office, somehow I can manage to do this with 2 toddlers. But there's no playbook. Nobody tells you this is what happens and this is how you run a congressional campaign. And frankly, it also depends where you're running. If it's a tough district, if it's an easy district, will you have party support? Who are you running against? So I did not know what I was getting myself into, but I was a pissed off mom, and it was not thought out. It was pure emotion to run for that congressional campaign. And I jumped into that race, and I put together a campaign, and it was the most grassroots movement that Long Island has ever seen. And we ended up building a really strong campaign and almost unseating him, and we outraised him and outworked him. But we did that because it was a bunch of people who were just really sick and tired of having a representative who refused to talk to them, who refused to hold town halls, who didn't listen, and who didn't care. So it wasn't planned, but it ended up being so much fun and such an incredible campaign. And it built this movement on Long Island of volunteers and activists.
And tell us about that decision to make the appeal to the FEC to use campaign funds for childcare.
Everybody said I was crazy. They said it was political suicide. They all told me I was nuts. I literally, as you mentioned in your intro, I would have a baby strapped to my chest, and I would have my toddler by my side, and I was doing call time with a baby on my boob, and I had a headset on, and I was juggling nursing and making donor calls, and it was nuts. And I did that for probably 5 months or so. And I had them with me. My mom is a teacher. She's retired now, thankfully, but during the campaign she was working. And so I had the kids with me every day till 3:30. And then she would come home and take them, and I could go out and knock on doors and talk to voters and do all the things I had to do. But I had 2 babies with me. And I remember being so embarrassed and thinking everyone was judging me because I would take them with me. And people, leaders in my own party critiqued me. They said I was a bad mom. They questioned whether or not I was fit to take care of my children when my child broke his leg during the campaign. They said all sorts of things. Somebody said that they had never seen a candidate use her children more because I brought my children with me to campaign events. There were 2 reasons I brought my kids with me. 1, I genuinely missed them and wanted to see them as much as possible. And 2, I didn't have childcare. I didn't have an option. It was either bring them or not go to the event.
And if it was a man who was bringing their kids, they would think, oh, what a terrific dad he is, right?
No, I actually saved this press clipping. There was an article that somebody wrote, and there's a photo of my husband with my son and the baby wrap and my daughter on his hip. And they're like, oh, and her husband can often be seen on the outskirts of their event holding the couple's young children. And there's a photo and a whole section in the article about my husband holding our kids. And I remember thinking, if this was reversed, that would never be
Oh,
of me.
no, of course not.
No, but it annoyed me so much that I saved it. And that's the difference. Men are considered responsible and good parents, and women are
Yeah.
considered bad moms.
And then, you know, putting, like you said, putting yourself forward and petitioning the FEC, you know, you were told that that may be just political suicide, right? That's just, you know, even drawing attention to the fact even more.
Exactly. You, as women, we're always told not to talk about our kids and to keep our
Yeah.
children out of our professional lives. And putting
Yeah.
that request in, I mean, I gave up my salary to run, and that's something that a lot of people don't realize. When you run for
Yeah.
Congress, you're talking a year to 2 years of your life without a salary, working full time.
Yeah.
Unless you're independently wealthy, it's very difficult to do that and also pick up the cost of childcare. We were 4 people living on my husband's salary, paying school loans and a mortgage and taxes and bills and all of that. And there was no way to also pick up the cost of childcare. And so I remember talking to my campaign manager and saying, I need to request this. And she was the only person who was supportive. Everyone else said, don't do it. And we wrote this request. And I still remember the day that she called me. It was a Friday afternoon. And she gets on the phone and she says, Liuba Grechen Shirley, sit down. And I thought I had done something terrible. I thought I was getting seriously in trouble. And Secretary Clinton had written a 3-page letter of support to the FEC, and then 25 members of Congress wrote in support. And I remember going down to DC to testify, and we knew that Glamour magazine was going to cover it. And the next day, it was a bipartisan unanimous decision. Every press outlet in the country covered it, including Fox News, that said it was the one bipartisan thing they could agree with. And if you know me, knowing Fox News agreeing with me on anything, it's shocking. But it was.
But interestingly enough, though, they had given permission in the past for males to use campaign funds.
There have been,
right?
Yeah, there had been 4 men who had individually received approval, but they had never had a quorum, so it was never an official ruling. And we've now, with the Vote One Foundation, have been trying to get this passed at the state level for state and local candidates. But in Louisiana in particular, a woman, Morgan Lamondre, who was running for a state seat, put the request into their ethics committee. That ethics committee had approved it for 4 men in the past, and they said no to her. And there was a 70-year-old man on their ethics committee who said, you have misplaced priorities, and your primary responsibility is to take care of your children. And she appealed. We helped her with the appeal process. She won the appeal. But that's usually the mentality, that for a man, that's perfectly fine. And usually men will use it, you know, if they want their wife to join them at a campaign event. And they'll use it more sparingly, where as a woman, when they use campaign funds for childcare, it's much more on a regular basis to help them actually run their campaign.
And I want to get to your decision to start Vote Mama, but while we're on that point, I guess, can you give us a sense, you know, we talked about the federal component with the FEC, and then you mentioned that, you know, obviously the states have different rules for state and local campaigns. Give us a snapshot of, and this is work that you all are doing, give us a snapshot of where we are now, how many states allow this. You mentioned Louisiana, which is my home state that I'm not very proud of in that case. But where are we just overall when you look at the country?
Yeah, we're at 26 states now that have approved this. So 16 have passed legislation, 9 have approved campaign funds for childcare through ethics rulings, and then Virginia has approved it through an attorney general ruling. And for all of the states that have approved it through ethics rulings, we're still trying to go back when we can, where it makes sense, to actually also get it codified. Because even if there's an ethics ruling, there are some candidates who are afraid to use their campaign funds for childcare. They're afraid that they will be judged. But if there is a piece of legislation that has been passed, it normalizes it. It makes people feel that they, you know, can do this without getting attacked more. So the goal is to get it passed in all 50 states, but we're at 26 that allow it right now.
And so after you lost in 2018, I want to go back to, you know, you deciding to, you know, start this organization. You know, you talk about that, you know, obviously you were upset that you lost, but you really channeled that energy into this new project. And how did you come up with the idea for it and get it off the ground?
I cried for a day. And then literally the next day, all I could think about was the beginning of my campaign and how difficult it was and what support I needed and what would have made a huge difference. I named it Vote Mama immediately. I launched the PAC side first. I launched the PAC side to support Democratic moms running from school board to Senate, launched the foundation about a year after that. But I launched the pack and I called it Vote Mama because frankly, my kids would run around screaming Vote Mama all the time. There was no doubt in my mind that that's what it had to be named. I remember talking to friends saying, I want to support other moms run for office. And we're like, well, I'm going to launch a pack and this is the name, of course. And it's really cute. I have one of my favorite videos is my son, who was a year old at the time, saying Vote Mama. And every once in a while, he'll ask me if I want him to say it in his baby voice because he had the cutest baby voice. And he'll still do it. But yeah, I named it Vote Mama and we started supporting moms. And I remember our launch event, Hillary Clinton joined us for our launch event. And she took a FaceTime call from her grandchildren in the middle of speaking. And
I
it
love
ended
it.
up going viral and ended up on Colbert that night. My mom called me screaming at midnight that we were on Colbert. And because of that, we got applications from hundreds of moms running for office across the country. And then about a year after the pack, I realized that there's only so much you can do when you support individual moms running if you're not
Mhm.
working to break down the structural barriers that they face when they run and then when they serve. There is so much that holds moms back from running, um, that you need to change. By the time we're 44 years old, 86% of American women are moms. And yet, when I launched Vote Mama, only 5% of Congress members were moms with kids 18 or younger. We're at 7% now. So we're slowly but surely growing. But you need to break down the structural barriers first to make it easier. And then you can support all of these incredible moms. So that's really why I launched the foundation.
And then you had a decision to make coming into 2020 because you had to decide, well, did you want to make a run again? I mean, we know that, women don't always, after a loss, decide to run again. But we also know that the way to win is to run more than one time. But you had to weigh a lot of different factors in that decision. Share how you kind of came to the decision not to run and to just continue with this organization.
It was the most difficult decision I ever made. I will tell you that. There were two major deciding factors. One, I was pregnant with my third child. And two, I had just launched Vote Mama.
Mhm.
Vote Mama had been around for about a little over a year at that point. And Peter King decided to retire, did not want to go through that campaign again. We really gave him a run for his money, made him spend down his entire war chest, and he retired. And I sat there, everybody across the country, they were texting me and calling and saying, you have to run, you can't miss this opportunity. And I took about a week to make the decision. And there were personal deciding factor. I had very easy pregnancies and very difficult births. After my son was born, I was hospitalized 2 weeks afterwards. I had retained placenta. I was on IV antibiotics at home for a month afterwards. And I was told, I remember sitting down with my campaign staff and thinking, what kind of maternity leave could I possibly take? And I was told, I could take about 2 weeks. And when after I had given birth to my two other children, there was no way I would be able to be back on a campaign trail after 2 weeks. And I ran for Congress with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I knew how difficult that was. But to do it with a brand new baby, I did not think I could do that and do the job that I needed to do to really successfully pull it off. And I didn't want to jump into a campaign that I didn't think I could give my all to at that point. I was due a month and a half before the primary. So there
Mhm.
was that. And then there was Vote Mama. And I knew that if I had stopped running Vote Mama at that point, if I had handed it over to somebody else, it wouldn't have continued to grow into the organization that it is today and the organization that I know it will be. And I could be one vote in a pretty purple district, or I could build a national organization that has the ability to completely transform the political landscape. And I kept sitting there thinking, I can build this organization or I can run for office with a brand new baby. And even if I win, just be one vote, where
Mhm.
for the most part, I'm still not going to be able to be as vocal as I would like to be if I was running this organization. And I chose Vote Mama. And that honestly was the best decision that I could have made because we've now supported over 250 moms running for office. Just this legislative cycle, we're only at April. So just this legislative cycle, we've introduced 19 pieces of legislation in 14 states. We opened our endorsements up again and got over 150 applications. We are in back-to-back interviews. We have transformed what it looks like to run as a mom. We are doing national research across the country, working with state legislators, both moms and dads and Democrats and Republicans, and this is making a massive difference just in terms of normalizing what it looks
Right.
like to run and to normalize what legislation is even discussed. If you look at the last presidential election, I still remember the first time there was a question on childcare and paid family leave in a debate. And that was so exciting to see that national conversation changing. And the fact that we're part of that national conversation and really changing it, that was what I wanted to do more. So it was hard, but it was the right decision.
And you mentioned some of the research that you all are doing. Tell us a little bit about some of the research questions that are out there and what you're working to find out.
Yeah, so we have just launched the State of Motherhood. We have
Mhm.
done the research at the federal level. We know how many moms and how many moms of young children are serving at the federal level. No one has that data at the state level. So we've put together this state survey. It's gone out to all women state legislators across the country. There are specific questions for those who are mothers, for those who are caregivers, and for those who are women without children, to get a
Mhm.
better understanding of what their experience is like when they run and when they serve. We have all of these stories, all of these anecdotes from legislators across the country. I want the hard data behind it because
Right.
I want to be able to show trends of what is actually happening. Some of the questions that you wouldn't even think about in terms of resources, is there a women's caucus? Is there a mother's caucus? Is there a breast and a room where you can breastfeed? Um, is there childcare for legislators? Do you have paid family leave? How far are you from the state capitol? I was talking to a legislator in Kentucky, and she was saying that any of the legislators who live within an hour and a half of the capitol, those are the parents with young children. If you go outside
Mm.
of that, none of them have young children because they don't
Mhm.
even think that they can possibly do that commute. Um, there are, is there a changing table in the women's room or in
Yeah.
the men's room? Things like that that you wouldn't even think to ask. I want to
Yeah.
know what resources there are and then what barriers there are.
Right. Well, and you mentioned the salary component, and some of these state legislatures is extremely low. And yeah, is there a correlation between the number of moms in those legislatures that have the lower salaries? I mean, what does that look like too?
There is a woman, Rebecca Mitchell. She's a state rep in Georgia. She spends over
Uh-huh.
100% of her income on childcare for her 4 children. So if you look at states, in New Hampshire, you get paid $100 per session. There are states
Right.
where you get paid $17,000 a year. And so state legislatures were set up to be, the citizens legislature. You're there part-time. You are expected to have another job. Very few people can serve at the state legislative level unless they're independently wealthy or they work for themselves and have flexibility.
Right.
If you're expected to be at your state capital multiple days a week, you can't be at another job. If you're making, $17,000 a year, there are many states where the average cost of childcare is more expensive than what you would get paid as your annual salary. So you can't even convince a working parent to run for office. And that's why we end up with legislation that harms women and children across the country because you don't have people in office that have that visceral experience. People legislate based on their lived experience.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned sort of the political arm of the organization, the PAC, supporting Democratic women. Is that correct? How do you decide who you're going to endorse? You mentioned all of the people that have reached out. How do you go through that decision making, and what is sort of your average kind of support for each candidate that you endorse, or does it vary by office?
It varies by candidate, actually. It
Yeah.
depends what the candidate needs. So we have an interview process. We have an application that candidates fill out, and then we sit down with them. And we're actually in the endorsement process right now. We're kind of in
Mhm.
back-to-back endorsement interviews. The first question is always tell us about yourself and why you decided to run. You can pretty much tell from that conversation, from that first part, whether or not we're going to endorse them. You get a feel for who they are and why they're running. And most moms, and I will tell you this honestly, there's usually one particular issue that got them into running for office. There's usually something that they have reached out to their representative about, that they've wanted help with, that they have been either ignored or just totally, told no. And they said, you know what, I can do this better myself. And that's usually when moms decide to run. And I love those stories. They're some of my favorite stories. We talked to somebody who was running for a town council race, and she was annoyed that her sidewalks were broken. And she invited her entire town council to walk with her. She took her kids to school. And when they did nothing about it, she decided to run for office, and she won. Those are the stories that I love. But then we go through all, the dynamics of the race and whether or not they know what is needed to win and whether or not they're going to put that work in. And those are the people we endorse. We endorse the people who will work hard, who are running to fight for working families, who are running to pass legislation that will make a difference for working families across the country. And then when it comes to what we provide direct financial support, we provide emotional support, we provide communications and comm support. I think, and I will tell you what makes us different. Every time I interviewed with the PAC when I was running, you tell everybody what's perfect about your campaign, all the endorsements, all the money, your path to
Right.
victory. You don't share what's going on in your life. And I wanted to provide that support for other candidates. We've had candidates burst into tears on the phone just because it's the first time that they can actually talk about what it's like to run as a mom and to do the work that they're doing or why they ran. You know, we had a candidate cry once because her 14-year-old was mad because she didn't have the time to take her to soccer practice anymore because she was campaigning. To have a safe space to talk about that and to get political advice, and
Yeah.
you know, that's what's really important. And we're building the moms network. It makes a huge difference to have that mentorship.
So you're not as concerned as some other organizations about, someone's political viability, in the sense that you want to just give them the chance. You're not weighing like some other organizations. Well, what does their polling look like? How much have they raised? Or are you?
We look at all of that as well.
All of that.
Yeah, I will tell you the first cycle, we were much, because we didn't, we were new. We actually wanted to support everybody, and we couldn't at that point because we, had applications, but we are
Right.
we're much more careful on who we support. And we do look at political viability now because we have so many applications and we just don't have the bandwidth to support everybody. So we look at political viability, and we look at, people who are really running for the right reasons.
Right. And you have some big supporters. I mean, I know you mentioned Hillary Clinton, weighing in on the FEC, but you've also had conversations with Elizabeth Warren, who's been very supportive. Tell us about that.
Elizabeth Warren, I will tell you, the first time I spoke with her, she called me. It was 2 weeks after I won the primary. And it was probably one of the worst days of my campaign. My son had broke his leg about 2 months after I started. He was 1. And then a week before my primary, he broke his leg again. And he was tested for osteogenesis imperfecta during my campaign. It was something I talk about it now, but I didn't talk about it during the campaign because I was attacked after the first time he broke his leg. Everybody questioned my ability to take care of my children. And so I didn't talk about it. And it was the day that he was tested for OI, and I had spent the entire day at the hospital, at the doctor's office where they tested him. And I went back, I got my children down for a nap, I left them with my mom, and I went back to do call time. And Elizabeth Warren called me that day, and I was just an emotional wreck, and she asked me how I was. And we talked politics for a little bit, and then I literally just burst into tears. And she ended up giving me the mom pep talk that I needed, told me about her Aunt B and her experience and how she almost quit her job when she was teaching at law school with her 2 children. And she said, when we moms, when we run out of milk, we make breakfast with orange juice. And she was so supportive, and was so supportive during my campaign. And then when I launched Vote Mama as well, that was one of the conversations that I thought of when I launched Vote Mama, that I wanted to provide that emotional support to other candidates as well. And it made a huge difference.
And looking ahead to the midterms, are there any candidates out there that kind of women to watch that have interesting stories that we should be sure to keep our eye on?
Yes. Jasmine Beach Ferrara is running against Madison Cawthorn in Western North Carolina. We have been supporting her before she even decided to run. We were chatting with her, and we endorsed on day 1 and maxed out to her campaign. She is absolutely incredible. She is a mom of 3. She is a leader in the LGBTQ community. She is a local county commissioner. She is a minister. She's just so incredible. And she's running a really, really great race against Madison Cawthorn, who we all know needs to go. So she's absolutely wonderful. Hillary Scholten is one of our former candidates who's now running again in Michigan's 3rd district. She's amazing. Sydney Kamlager, who's running for Karen Bass's seat in LA. Laura Gillen, who's running on Long Island. She is absolutely amazing. Nikema Williams, always, she was one of our first federal candidates. She's running for re-election. Johanna Hayes is running for re-election. Cindy Axney. We have wonderful, wonderful federal candidates. Brittany Peterson is actually running in Colorado. She is a state senator there, just introduced legislation to allow paid family leave for state legislators. She gave birth while in office, and she took 12 weeks of paid leave, but she had to basically categorize it as long-term sickness. So she's introduced this legislation, it's a game changer, and it's something that's really necessary.
Yeah. Well, before we go to questions, and I know we have a couple, I did want to bring in, we have a special questioner guest to start off. And I wanted to bring her in, Dr. Ruth Nemzoff, and she was the assistant minority leader in the New Hampshire House of Representatives from 1979 to 1981. And I thought she would be interesting to hear her story as a different generation who was dealing with some of these very problems, 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and get her thoughts. And I know she has a question for you too. So Ruth, are you there?
I'm here.
Great.
Hi.
How are you? It's good to see you.
Good to see you. So in 1974, I was asked to run for the legislature by the Democratic Party. And I think it was because I started the women's movement in Southern New Hampshire, of course, with others. And I had helped start a program for what we called then persons with disabilities to get jobs. So I thought I was pretty hot stuff. As I started knocking on doors, the only question that was ever asked me was I married to the real estate man named Berman or the doctor named Berman, which was quite insulting. But I stopped being angry because I wanted people's votes. And instead, I just listened to them and I got to hear their stories. But people did tell me to go home and be with my children. They slammed their door, the door in my face. They called me a baby killer. And I swear to you, I have never killed a baby in my life. But it was pretty tough and I was not prepared for this. My kids at the time were 6 and 8. I did get elected. And of course, the week that I got elected, I discovered I was pregnant with my 3rd child. And at that point, I began getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And I found I couldn't go to the parties. I couldn't do all the networking things that I'd done so much, but I could read. And I became the most powerful person on my committee because I was able to read. And I had read everything in sight. And I began to gain some respect. However, I found that many of the men in particular did not really want to respect me until my belly started to show. And then something about this, the Madonna can't be a terrible person. They would protect me and then they began to listen to me. So I began to accrue some power quite inadvertently because of my maternal situation. On the other hand, I fortunately was able to use this to help other women when some birth mothers came to me and said, we would like to see our children. We were told we would never think of them again. And we think of them every single day. And I was able to use my position as a legislator to get everyone together, all the different sides of the adoption triangle, and change that law. So I do want to say, I agree with you that we need mothers in the legislature. When I was in the legislature, there was what was called the 3 martini lunch, where men could go, have 3 martinis and write it off from their taxes. I could not write off my childcare. So the question I have for you is, have you looked at the tax law and what are things that the tax law could do? Eventually we got rid of the 3 martini lunch, but we didn't add the paying for childcare. So I just wonder what you're doing with that.
That's a great question. Thank you, Ruth.
What we're doing with the tax law? So this is for the way that campaign funds for childcare works. It's basically money that you're raising for your campaign and you write it off as a campaign expense. So it's not getting written off your taxes. It's actually your campaign funds. So when you put, you file what you've raised and what you're spending your money on, you just put your childcare as a campaign expense. So for instance, when I did it, I hired a babysitter and she was actually part of my staff. And she became a full-time, well, she was part-time, but she became a fully established member of my staff. And there are other candidates who will, have their children in daycare centers and they'll pay for them and they'll get reimbursed and they'll put that on their filing. So that's how it's set up.
I guess maybe
I would say that I was just going to encourage moms in the legislature to look at the tax law because there may be ways that could help.
You mean more for your salary, writing off your part of your expenses from your salary? I think that's
knows?
probably what you tax
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Electeds,
Yeah.
because of the way we're introducing this legislation, they are
Yeah.
still able, once they're even in office, they are able to use their campaign funds for childcare. So they don't have to use their salary. So they wouldn't have to write it off with tax
Right.
law. It's just paid for out of their campaign account.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Ruth, for
My pleasure.
sharing a little bit about your story. We appreciate it. We do have a couple other questions I want to get to. Let's see. Jamie has asked a question, and she says, has the pandemic changed anything when it comes to electing moms?
It's an interesting question because I honestly thought it would make it harder for more moms to run, but I think it's actually made it easier because there is the ability to attend campaign events from your living room while you're wearing pajama pants and you just put a shirt on and you have babies in the next room. So it's actually made it a lot easier in some cases. It's difficult in the states where you're expected to be in public all the time. You know, if there are no, if you are a legislator and you can't participate remotely, that's made it more difficult. But for the most part, it was a very strange 2-year period to run for office. But there have been a lot of moms who have, you know, continued to run and continue to do it from home with babies. And they've been able to participate in more events because you can get on one Zoom and hop to another Zoom and hop to another rather than traveling across your district. In some cases, it's made it more difficult because there are so many moms at home doing homeschooling, you know, during that time where we had all our kids home. It was difficult for people to do it then. So there's that balance. There were some good things about it and there were some really difficult things about it. So I'm not sure I can give you an overall answer. It helped for some people and it hurt some people.
Yeah. And then of course we also have, you know, women who are caregivers of other people in their families, like, you know, their parents, for example. And that comes into play as well, pandemic or no pandemic, you know, as well as having young children. We are sort of a lot of women in that kind of sandwich generation where they're taking care of young children, but they're also taking care of their aging parents.
Exactly. And I should mention that in all of the pieces of legislation we've introduced this year, we've tried to make it not just campaign funds for childcare, but for dependent care as well, because there are so many women specifically dealing with that in the sandwich generation. So it's for dependent care much more broadly.
Right. That's great. We also had a question from Ramirez who says, how can my peers in Mexico reach Vote Mama Foundation to build alliances and network? I believe transitional networks would definitely contribute to raise awareness about motherhood and politics. And I guess just more broadly on that, you know, is there international movements that you've seen that are trying to do similar things?
Yes, and I love that question. And Louisa Dugan from our team actually just wrote in the chat how you can reach us. We would love to talk to you about it. There's actually, there's a member of parliament in Britain who's launched a very similar program after talking to us about getting moms into office. And this is something, if you look at Nordic countries, it's actually a question that I have, and it's a piece of research that I want to do. And I've actually talked to a few people about doing this eventually. We're not there yet, but if you look at Nordic countries, you're talking like 40 to 44% of women in their legislatures. And there's also, is it the chicken and the egg? Because they have great paid family leave, they have great childcare, they have flexible working options. One of the research pieces I want to do eventually is seeing whether or not those pieces of legislation and those policies came before electing all of these women, or were these women in office, which is why we passed this wonderful, you know, these wonderful policies that are so family friendly. So we want to continue to work with other countries. Right now, England is the only country that's launched anything similar to Vote Mama, and we've had, you know, extensive conversations with them and given them all our advice, and we've done a number of public events with them as well, and so they've launched that. But we would absolutely love to talk to you. The more countries that are doing this, the better.
That's great. And of course, many other countries have paid family leave to begin with.
We're the
as
only
well.
country other than Papua New Guinea that doesn't have paid family leave. There are 71 countries that provide paid paternity leave, and we don't even have paid paternity leave. So.
Yeah, no, it's I think we can probably learn a lot from places overseas as well, right?
Exactly. I mean, we are 27th in education. We are 27th in healthcare. We spend more money per person on healthcare than the rest of the developed world, and we have the worst maternal mortality rate. the US is drastically behind other countries when it comes to so many of these policies. And it's something that we need to change, and the only way to make any serious policy change is to change who has a seat at the table.
And I guess, when we think about moms raising, especially daughters, I'm just wondering, your thoughts on how we encourage our daughters to be politically active, and advice that we can give sort of the younger generation to interest them in politics, and also let them know that they have an important role to play to participate in politics as they get older.
Yes. Well, this is my baby girl. Take your girls with you. I mean, take your boys too, honestly. Take your children with you to everything that you can take them to. I will tell you, my daughter, when she was 2 years old, she said to me, she said, "I love your protests, I hate your meetings." And I remember laughing so hard at that, because she came to everything with me. And so did my son. My son doesn't remember it as much because he was so little, but my daughter, she was sitting on my lap once. We were at the bill signing for paid family leave in New York, and it wasn't my event. I wasn't talking, and she looked at me and she said, "Mama, why aren't you speaking?" And I said, it's not my event." And she went up to the podium when the governor was finished in her Peppa Pig dress, and she asked me to pick her up, and she gave a speech at the podium. And in her mind, it was just normal. And there are so many funny stories like that during my campaign. I was reading her The Princess and the Pea once, and there was a part where the queen puts the princess to bed and she leaves. And Mila was like, "Well, what do you mean she leaves? Where did she go?" And I kind of looked at her, I'm like, "Well, she put her to bed and she went." She goes, "Oh, she went out. You mean she went to a fundraiser?" And I laughed so hard, because that's what my daughter was picking up for my life. I put her to bed and I went out. I was at a fundraiser. It became the norm for my kids to see that I was running for office. And it's now the norm for them. They know so many incredible moms across the country who run for office, who serve in office. The more that they see that as normal, the more that they participate in going to town hall meetings, going to school board meetings, going to protests, going to canvas kickoffs. The more you can take them out and have them be civically engaged, the more they understand that their voice matters. And it just becomes completely normal for them to think running for office is just what women do. It's just what moms do. And I know I'm answering this question for a long time, but I'm going to tell you one more story.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
When you have your campaign signs up, so we had campaign signs always, like they're always on the way to my daughter's school, and somebody from the other side would always come and take them down and put King signs up, and she would pay attention to this, and it was something that bothered her. And she was thinking one day as we drove home and she saw the King signs, and she said, "Mama, does Peter King have girls?" And I thought, "Oh my God, where is this question going?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, does he have girls, who run his campaign?" And I started to laugh, because in her mind, all of my senior staff except one, they were women. And in her mind, women ran campaigns. Moms ran for office, women ran campaigns. That was the most normal thing. And I love that she picked that. And so just keep your children involved in everything that you're doing and have them participate, and they'll grow up thinking it's a normal thing to do.
I love that. That's great. Let's see. Here's a question from Julie. She says, how do you see education as a campaign or policy issue for women candidates? It seems like a hot political potato right now, right? Especially, I guess, post-COVID and masking and all of the rest. There is a lot of interest and discussion amongst candidates reaching out to moms as voters. And we certainly saw that, I think, in the Virginia governor's race. What are your thoughts on that?
Education is incredibly a hot topic at this point. Yeah. Our school board candidates, honestly, are probably the most attacked out of all of our candidates. At the federal level, when you're talking about education, stick to the fact that we need proper funding for public education. That is the most critical thing. If you're running at the state level, it's a completely different. If you're running for school board, we have people who are being attacked. We have people who are being screamed and cursed at daily. I have school board members who we've supported who call me, hyperventilating after their meetings, because people will come and scream at them because of the mask situation. This made up CRT, everybody is fighting about that. It's such a Republican talking point, and it's dangerous to our children. We have people who want to burn books. We have people across this country who are talking about both sides of the Holocaust. All of this is incredibly dangerous, and I cannot believe these are conversations that we're having in this country. And when you talk about education, all of that is this noise, and you need to focus on making sure that our children are getting the education that they need, that they are getting the funding that they need, And it's incredibly difficult to have that conversation in such a charged atmosphere, but it's something that you need to focus on and make sure that our kids are getting the support and the funding that they need to actually get the education that they want. And I don't know if I have better advice than that, because it is so difficult and it has become so controversial. And the fact that we are talking about burning books in this country is mind-boggling to me.
I wanted to go back a little bit to sort of normalizing as much as possible the notion of moms running for office and having kids with them and making that kind of a part of their, everyday campaigning. I feel like we've seen a trend over the last couple of years of more women who are, are letting sort of their authentic selves come through a little bit more, even, filming campaign ads in the minivan with kids in the back seat. So it's becoming more normalized, but yet we still have instances, and you guys, I think, highlighted a story a couple of weeks ago about a woman who was running, I think, for the state Senate in New York, in Brooklyn, who was speaking to actually a progressive organization, doing a Zoom, not dissimilar to what we're doing now. And I think her child maybe had been in the background, and she got the question of, how can you possibly run, with children, who's going to take care of kids? And, that kind of question still exists.
It's the first question you will get asked. If you are a woman running for office with small children, you will immediately be asked by everyone, who will watch your kids while you campaign. Francoise is running for a state Senate seat. She's absolutely incredible. She was asked not once, but twice during that event, how can you be a state senator and a mom? How can you manage that? By a man, of course, but we helped her get press around it. We helped her get national press. We helped her get local press. And that it was a local progressive Democratic group in Brooklyn. We actually forced them to tweet for the first time in 3 years because they were responding to this. She was so upset afterwards, honestly. And because we provided that support and really helped, it turned it around, and it took back the power and said, no, you know what, I can do this and be an excellent state senator and an excellent mom at the same time. And the only way to change that is to keep talking about it. And that really is necessary. Somebody asked me once, how many moms do you need to get elected to feel successful? And I said, it's not about that. It's about normalizing this conversation about what it is to be a mom and to serve. And we're always told, don't talk about your kids, you will be judged. Honestly, in 2018, we saw a lot of candidates who said, screw it, I'm just going to talk about my kids, and that's who I am, and it's a huge part of who I am. One of my favorite photos is Abigail Spanberger with her 4-year-old between her legs when she gave her acceptance speech, doing that. And she was nervous. I talked to her about it recently. She was nervous, and she's like, I still remember my husband off the stage calling my daughter. And I had the same thing when I did my acceptance speech after the primary, when we had our first big election kickoff. My daughter stood under my skirt, and my campaign manager got really mad at my husband. And I still remember that year. And so many of us have it, that we're going to be judged. Talk about it. Talk about your kids. Bring them with you. The more you do it, the more it becomes not a big deal. And, Kelda Roys, when she ran for governor, nursed her daughter in her campaign ad. I loved that campaign ad. The more you do that, the more it's not this big scary thing. Oh my God, she's a mom. Amy McGrath did it. Amy McGrath had great videos of her kids at the doctor's office. Amy is actually our Kentucky state chair now. The more we build this mamas network, and the more you see other women doing it, the more comfortable you feel talking about it. It shouldn't be this big taboo. The fact that we haven't passed universal childcare after a 2.5-year national pandemic where millions of mothers in particular have been kicked out of the workforce, that should be this huge taboo. Running for office as a mom, that's exactly who we need in office, those perspectives.
Right. And I think, also it's important to sort of do what I call the see something, say something. When things like that happen, just like you all amplified that story in New York, and bringing people's, attention to when this kind of thing happens. And same goes for, issues of, sexism that arise in the media when they're covering, candidates and campaigns. It's important to, have organizations like yours and to actually allow other people to, speak up and say, wait a minute, this isn't right. this is double standard.
That's exactly what needs to happen. So our New York State Democratic chair recently said, so Laura Gillen she's a candidate. She was the former town of Hempstead supervisor on Long Island, first Democrat to win that seat in over 100 years. She's an excellent candidate. She had told Jay that she had wanted to run for Congress since she was working on Capitol Hill, since she was a student at Georgetown. Jay took that personal piece of information and turned around and told the press that Laura told him that she had wanted to run for Congress ever since she was a little girl. And that was a dream of hers to run for Congress ever since she was a little girl. And he's not in the business of making people's dreams come true. He's in the business of electing Democrats. We reached out to organizations across the country and we put together a national statement calling out that sexism. And I will tell you that people in the past would have been terribly afraid to call out the state chair because this is a person you don't want to have on your bad side. But if you have organizations that will stand up and support you and say, this is not acceptable, this sexism is not acceptable in politics or frankly anywhere, that's when things start to change. But you need to have people who have your back. Otherwise, it's a scary thing to stand up to the people in power. That old boys network is so alive and so well. And you need to really have a group of incredibly strong women behind you who will say, no, that's not acceptable.
Well, we have a good closing question here for you. And that is, do you plan on running for office again?
I definitely do. I don't know what office and at what point, but I think everyone should run for office at some point. It's the best thing that you can possibly do. It's an incredible experience. I definitely will run for office again. Right now, I am in the business of building a national organization that will change politics. That is my focus. I love my work so much. I have the best team and I get to work with incredible moms across the country. But eventually, yes, I will run for office again.
That's great. And I guess, tell us how people can, help be more involved. I know we put a couple of links in the chat, but do you all, have interns? I know we'll probably have a lot of young women watching, students. Tell us how people can become more involved in your organization.
Yes, we have an absolutely incredible fellowship program. Our political director runs it, and I will tell you, it's amazing. So we will actually be opening it's April now, we'll be opening our fellowship applications coming up pretty soon for the summer. So if you are watching and you would like to apply, go to our website. Some of them will be on the PAC site. So I don't know if I can tell you that on this, but votemamafoundation.org is our foundation site.
Right.
And if I can I give you the PAC site on this as well?
Sure. Okay,
So
it's fine.
votemama.org. So votemama.org and votemamafoundation.org, and our fellowships will be listed soon for the summer, and we will start. And Louisa, who's actually one of our fellows currently, is posting in the chat right now with the information. But yeah, go to our website, sign up, apply for a fellowship, get involved, follow us on social media. We're Vote Mama US and Vote Mama FDN. Those are our two social media links on both Instagram and Twitter. And get involved. I don't know if I'm going to give you some insider information. We are about to launch a membership program this summer. So we will be building out a grassroots army of volunteers, and everybody who's listening to this, we would love to have you get involved.
Great. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I'm sorry that you had to do so while you were sick, but we extra appreciate it. And you sounded fine. So I hope everybody feels better soon. And I want to thank everybody in the audience for watching as well. And have a good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.